Welcome back to the show, episode 3, or the trifecta around the coronavirus epidemic. Jason Dodier here, joined again by my trusty sidekick co-host, Jaret Grossman. And today we're going to be talking about really dealing with anxiety, mounting depression, and loneliness, both that are taking place currently and post the COVID-19 epidemic. You know, Jaret, before the emergence of COVID-19, anxiety disorders were prevalent and already ranked as one of the most common mental health disorders globally. I think the last numbers I saw was close to 290 million people around the world are impacted or have anxiety disorders. And, I think it impacts roughly 40 million adults, or 18% of the population here in the United States. These times are really intriguing from a multifaceted standpoint. People are facing a lot of uncertainty that leads to anxiety, stressing about car payments, mortgage payments, rent, just even the basics of getting groceries, right? So I think just to kind of kick off on the anxiety topic, and then we'll delve in with our special guest into loneliness. Jaret, for people worrying about paying their bills, what should they do to ease the financial stress and uncertainty that their current situation has put them in?
Yeah, so this is obviously a predicament that almost everybody's going through, is the uncertainty surrounding how they should approach paying their bills. And then obviously the health crisis, making sure that you stay as healthy as possible, washing your hands, doing all the precautions so that you don't catch a disease or a virus or whatnot, so there's anxiety around that too. So when it comes to the financial uncertainty, whether you own your own business or whether you work for somebody else and worried about being laid off, hopefully you still have some cash flow coming in. And if not, you got to get liquid right away, right? So that means if you do have access to capital in terms of lines of credit, you're using your credit cards, maybe calling them and seeing if they could raise or increase the limit on those credit cards and defer interest, lower interest. You got to pick up the phone. You got to call, any kinds of means that you have available. So it might mean refinancing your home, for instance, and taking out, some equity line of credit there. But also in terms of the individual payments, you have to pick up the phone and you got to call each one of these people that you owe money to, for instance, whether it's a credit card, whether it's your car payment, whether it's your mortgage payment. A lot of them are running programs. Some of them will defer payments for 4 months right now. They'll just extend the length of your car lease, for instance, by an extra 4 months. You got to take advantage of this. You don't know how long this is going to go on for. So take advantage of as many things as you possibly can. And when it comes to, contracts that you have, let's say that you're commercial in a commercial lease, you have to talk to your landlord. You have to see if there are measures that they're willing to take in terms of maybe extending your lease in exchange for working out some kind of reduction in payment that can make things work. But the bottom line is you got to take it 1 week at a time, one bill at a time. Josh, in a previous episode, Jason, he shed some enlightening stuff with us, about debt and how people with, good moral compasses, they don't necessarily want to not pay their bills. They really feel a tremendous amount of stress and anxiety when they have a cloud over their head. And they want to make good on their payments, but if the cash isn't coming in, you got to let go of a lot of the fears, the unguided fears that, at the Citibank is not going to send a hitman, at you, So they will work with you in some instances or whatnot. And if they're not, going to, you got to just take the serious payments first, right? So take them in order of seriousness. So, for instance, anything that could be foreclosed upon or where they're going to seize assets from you, those are the ones that you got to really try to make those payments first and work whatever you can. But if they're not willing to budge, your mortgage payment probably is going to come first. Your car payment's going to come first. And I know that a lot of other companies are just working things out, whether it's Allied Financial. I know they're running programs. And I know that a lot of banks and a lot of mortgage companies are willing to work with people. So the stimulus check is probably going to come. You got to act on that. If you own a small business, take advantage of what's going on in terms of the SBA situation where they're stepping in and they're providing lots of assistance in terms of loans. Even these third-party lenders are in more of a position to be able to lend and traditional banks because the Fed dropped interest rates so much, right? So they're getting, to take a complicated story and cut it down a little bit, they're basically getting money really, really cheap right now, these banks, practically at interest-free rates. So what happens is the interest that they pass on to the consumer drops as well. So now you could get really, really, sizable loans for very low cost. And, the SBA is running programs where the government will literally forgive the loan if you're using it to pay for rent, to pay for employees, for instance. So if you own a business and you filed your tax returns on time and you have some financial statements that you could show or whatnot, just log on to their website, take advantage of it. Now's the time to really get liquid. And, you got to be smart with it. So if you do have some capital, you've been saving for a little while, and you have an emergency fund, a lot of financial advisors talk about that. This is probably a time of need of that emergency fund. So tap into that to pay for food or whatnot. But again, try to defer as many of the payments that you have, these monthly payments, as possible, and cancel subscriptions and cancel things that aren't urgent right now, and eliminate as much overhead as possible. That's going to ease your anxiety, because anxiety is just a warning light. Imagine you go into your car and there's a warning light that comes on when you're running low on gas. It's giving you an indicator or signal to go do something about it, right? Go fill up with gas, and that problem is going to be eliminated. So what happens, Jason, is usually, and I've been fortunate to work with a lot of clients in the mental health, space to help them with combating fear or anxiety or depression or whatnot. What happens is that they get so consumed by the idea of the warning light itself that that's all that they focus on, and they don't react to get to a solution, which is filling up with that tank with gas, right? So it's whatever anxiety you're experiencing, it's an indicator for something, and probably prompting you to take action somewhere. And if it comes down to financial security or whatnot, and that's what you're anxious about, you got to take action in terms of lowering your bills immediately, canceling all these subscriptions and lowering all the payments, and securing some kind of means to be able to get capital until you get that cash flow going again. Whether it's a business, you might, in certain industries, you're going to take a hit for a little while. Other industries are booming. Amazon can't handle the orders. So if you're in the online space and you have infrastructure, or if you're in, you have a grocery store or a supermarket or whatnot, those people are hiring right now. So you just sort of pivot. We got to be really good at changing. And when it comes to other mental, health struggles, for instance, if you're experiencing depression or loneliness, for instance, depression can be useful. It can be, you basically, there's extreme in everything. Sometimes depression is good because it helps us reflect, and it helps us sulk a little bit about what we did wrong or past mistakes that we made. So it's important to reflect on bad decisions that we made, so that we don't make future bad decisions again, right? That history is basically the greatest lesson that we could really receive for ourselves. So we're going to spend a lot of time alone with our thoughts. You got to own your thoughts. You got to be a master of your emotions. So if you've always been an external world person, where you're constantly looking for the external to give you peace within, you're now going to be faced with a reality where you're going to have to own that peace within without it coming from the external. So it's just take it as a lesson of strength, that you're building your internal strength, which are muscles. Being able to master your emotions are muscles that we need to develop within.
And Jaret, can you help? Can you expand on that a little more when you look at some of the techniques, right? You're talking about expanding these muscles, being more agile, doing some cerebral gymnastics, if you will, right? But what are some of the things that can get you there? Is it stuff like Tai Chi, yoga, just basic body weight exercises, with your health and wellness background, and also the foods that we eat, right? And it come from having just a regular, closely monitored schedule each day that gives you something to look forward to and to kind of keep you balanced, right? So having a regimen that's balanced with some wellness exercises that will help your mental state. What would you say to folks on that piece?
Yeah, so you hit the nail on the head, Jason. I mean, when it comes to a schedule, you have to get into a routine when you're at home. If you're used to getting up at 6 a.m. and getting on the train to go to work, and you have sort of a to-do list from a manager or an executive that's sort of guiding you in terms of what to do every day, and now that overbearing guidance isn't a major presence in your life right now, you have to be leading the ship, so to speak. So that means you got to be a little bit more disciplined in terms of your day. Get up, get a shower immediately. The cold shower will sort of wake you up really fast. Do a little exercise routine if you can in the morning or whatnot to just get the blood flowing, jump around in place. We talk, a little bit about that, Jason, in terms of what they could do, at home. And then nutrition is really important because when you think about it, with this whole intermittent fasting, craze that we've been in for a while, which is just basically starve yourself to lose weight, it's not a long-term sustainable solution. And what happens when you starve yourself, of course, you're going to lose weight and burn fat, but you're relying on your heart beating faster. You're relying on adrenaline pumping through you to carry you through the day. And that could have consequences on your adrenal glands. And then when you're starving, poverty is like, and not having enough food is the lowest level of the pyramid, so to speak, in terms of consciousness, right? If I don't know where my next meal is, that's going to be the most pressing thing on my mind all day long. So you're literally taking your consciousness from focusing on big issues that you could solve to now, how am I going to make it through the day without food? Because your body doesn't know that you're basically tricking yourself to burn fat. It's basically on this path of, I need to sustain myself, right? So that's going to ease anxiety in and of itself if you have really solid nutrition and meals. You have a full meal where you often take a nap after you eat a big meal. You become relaxed, right? So it's hugely important to just sit down and have your meals every single day in sort of a routine. And in terms of, if the anxiety gets out of control, because even that might not be enough, a routine, a schedule, eating, exercising, breathing techniques are really important. So the Navy SEALs, when they're under tremendous stress, they have to learn how to control their heart rate, their pulse rate, right? So what do? They do a simple technique where they basically close their eyes. They breathe in through their nose 4 seconds. So you could try it. They hold it in and they allow the air to come through their entire body, where their stomach actually protrudes out, because you're going to carry more oxygen that way than as opposed to shallow breaths. So you hold that breath in for 4 seconds, then you breathe out through your mouth for 4 seconds, and then you hold for 4 seconds before you start the whole process again, right? So what this is going to do is release a different set of hormones throughout your body. It's going to calm your whole system down, so these are.
When you say hold for 4 seconds
Yeah.
before you do it again, is that no breathing, or are you just regular breaths?
So yeah, you breathe in for 4 seconds, you hold the breath inside you for 4 seconds, you breathe out for 4 seconds, and then you hold for 4 seconds before you breathe in again, right? So when you think about it, when you're underwater and you hold your breath for a long time, when you come up out of the water, the first thing you do is typically you're going to explode with a breath out.
Yeah,
right?
You're gasping.
Right. But the first instinct is you breathe out as opposed to breathing in. So we think that the first, the thought that we have is we're holding our breath for so long, we need oxygen. But the true thing of what's going on is you're building up carbon dioxide within you, and you need to force that out as soon as you rise above the surface. So we're taking shallow breaths, and some of us have an overload where we're not getting enough oxygen, but we're also poisoning ourselves a little bit with too much carbon dioxide. You need to start breathing forcefully outward to get that out. And that's where sort of resetting and holding that breath of 4 seconds sort of resets us a little bit. Yeah. So, there's all kinds of anxiety techniques. There's something called tapping that I would look into, where you close your eyes and you tap at certain pressure points of your body very gently. And obviously listening to relaxing music, and just understanding that there are certain things, in our control, Jason, and there's certain things out of our control. And there has to be a peace with that we live in a society. There's a system at place. And Josh was talking about some fantastic stuff a few episodes ago, that whatever the crisis is in terms of the economic system, it's not the first time that something like this has happened. We go back to 2008, we go back to 87, go back to 1929 with the Depression, and there's lots of other examples. And it might not be the exact same economic system coming out of this or whatnot, and people are going to get hurt, but there is a reset. There is something that's going to, Josh put it eloquently, where he said basically that they're going to put a system out there where there's plenty of opportunity. And so you got to just ride this wave out as best as possible. And it's basically a matter of just surviving and getting through without compromising too much of your morals or what you stand for and all that stuff, and not, draining your bank account and your reserves as much as possible, just being a little bit more frugal with everything that's going on. But, with Jason, obviously in terms of the corporate world, people are going to be experiencing layoffs. That's just the nature of it. In your experience, Jason, have you ever been through a cycle where your company has gone through an extensive layoff period, or where they decided they needed to trim what's going on? Because anybody who runs a business, your biggest expenses are the rent or the notes that you carry, and then payroll, right? Those are the two biggest expenses you look to cut immediately. So, what is that process like, Jason, in terms of how they handle who is going to be the deciding factor in terms of who gets laid off, and what is that criteria, so to speak, in terms of are they focusing on people who have inflated salaries, so to speak, and they're going to go to them and approach them to try to reduce it with a reduced offer, so to speak, to hopefully keep them on? Or are they just going to say, we have to just eliminate that completely, we'll hire new, or people who weren't performing well? What is that process like, Jason, so people can sort of prepare if they do have a corporate job? So, because a lot of people are just, really anxious of whether they're going to have a job when this is all over for the same corporation, and if they can prepare, what can they do about it?
Yeah, I think in most cases it's really important to understand when a layoff occurs, it typically has nothing to do with the employee's personal performance, right? Certain instances where an employee is fired immediately can go from falsifying records, drug or alcohol possession, right? Damaging company property, things of that nature. I just wanted to clarify that a layoff is typically, and sometimes it's temporary, right? It could be like a government furlough where it's you're laid off for a little bit of a period of time with a promise to return, or an employee could be rehired at some other point in time, and there's a package put in place. There's a lot of ways to structure it, but keep in mind that there's layoffs can be they're usually due to restructuring, downsizing, right? Issues with the economy which we're facing right now, and they can be costly in many ways too, Jared, for companies. So you have to kind of weigh out the pros and cons, the debits and credits, if you will, of doing a layoff. And for example, a company might have to pay, as you said, big severance packages depending on what level or tier that employee is within the company. And then you've got issues to consider in terms of the remaining workers. What is their productivity like and morale, overall morale? Are they going to work harder for the fear of losing their jobs, or will morale decline? How transparent are they going to be about the layoff? And the company could even be faced with lawsuits depending on how the layoffs are conducted. So there's a lot of things to kind of consider when you look at the process, and especially if you're driving, you're driving through it. But I think there's a couple key things companies should be doing that are going to be putting layoffs in place due to these unfortunate circumstances we're in. They've got to really think through the plan, right? Think about which resources and support structures will be offered, how they're going to conduct layoffs. Is it going to be on a one-to-one? Is it going to be a massive kind of RIF or reduction in force? What's the cohesive message going to be? If they let go of low performers first, did they put those individuals on plans, right? A lot of companies will, if you're not in the firing category, immediate termination, but if you're in a category where you've been a low performer for a couple of quarters or a year, do you have a plan, right? Is there a plan in place where you're working with your manager and other support functions with the organization to help you, to give you the opportunity to improve so that you can retain your job? Or maybe there's another part of the organization, Jaret, that you'd be better suited for. So there's got to be a really well-structured, clear, conscientious plan in place. And these plans are usually thought of ahead of time for businesses, and they can be malleable based on the business environment and where you're focusing on. The other is the communication structure, because let's be real here. In the very viral times we live in, and social media and things being shared instantaneously, you have to conduct layoffs with a very focused manner and make sure that you are compassionate, especially from a human resources perspective. Because if for example, if you're marching people out of the building, making it seem like they did a major violation, or they did something that would warrant immediate firing, as some of those items I mentioned at the beginning when I was talking, that's going to spread like wildfire, right? And it's going to leave, think about the goodwill, the hit to goodwill that you would face by going through something like that, or helping to take your employees just out of their day-to-day element, and they're completely flustered with no real vision, and it just makes you look really bad. I think the third element is that we've seen, and it can help to answer your question and make individuals feel a little bit better, is outplacement and other unique support services to kind of ease the blow. Finances are very tight for most Americans. If there's a possibility to consider offering outplacement support for exiting employees, that's going to help support their transition. You've got services like FlexJob. LinkedIn's got, I think, a job seeker premium platform that helps people kind of get a leg up in their job search. And as you mentioned, and we talked about on prior episodes, right? There are certain companies, especially in the service economy, that are ramping up, hiring tens of thousands of employees. So this could be a kind of a smooth onboarding to take them from their current situation and have very, very little downtime. And in some cases, Jaret, they might get they'll get a severance package, and they lose, if anything, they might gain a little bit, right? They might not have a lull where they go without anything. So those would be some of my suggestions. And I would encourage companies to study businesses over the years that have done it the right way and the wrong way, and make sure that they've got a plan structured around that to ensure that their workers always feel comfortable, always feel at ease, and never feel like their personal rights are being violated. And this is going to ultimately safeguard the reputation of these companies long term, especially as we come out of this downturn in the economy. So those would be my suggestions as we talk about just a high level, and we're going to go deeper into this in subsequent episodes. But given the time now, that's what I would that's how I would recommend. So want to welcome everybody back to the studio. Jason Dodier and Jaret Grossman here. And this is actually the third episode where we're focusing in on the current coronavirus epidemic throughout the U.S. You heard a little bit from the first two about ways people can adjust and adapt their lifestyles, how to innovate, how to deal with some of the things that are happening around us, especially as some of our loved ones, friends, and family are out of work. Clearly, one of the things that have come out of those discussions is, and people have asked us about, is, well, how do you cope with isolation, anxiety, and some of the mounting depression that is happening right now, especially in big cities where folks are, like myself here in New York, we're kind of stuck in a very small environment with limited opportunities to go outside. I mean, we're trying to really keep a distance, maintain social distancing, and flattening the curve. Given all of the buzz around this topic, it's an area we thought was extremely important, and we wanted to dive a little bit deeper on the show. And with that said, I'm really, both Jaret and myself are extremely grateful to be welcoming on Wayne Grover. So outside of being a good friend and somebody that's heavily involved in community impact, Wayne's got an interesting story that he's going to share with all of us today. But his background spans multiple decades working in entrepreneurship, alternative investments, capital management, communications, public speaking, negotiations. He really runs the full gamut. And I think that's what makes Wayne an ideal person to kind of provide a perspective, bring people up in these down times, and share a bit about his story. So one of the things that I'm going to hand it over to Wayne in a little bit to tell about himself, but Wayne's behind a company called a nonprofit organization called YANA, You Are Not Alone. And he established this organization based on some of the lows he experienced in his life. And he's been doing this for many years now. Wayne's going to tell you about that. And he's going to tell you about some of the things he's doing and ramping up within the community to kind of give back, show hope, and leverage some of the amazing gifts and symbols that YANA has at their disposal. And it's our privilege, really, Wayne, to welcome you on the show and introduce you to our community. And be great if you could kind of give a little bit about your background dealing with depression and coping with some of the things you've done in your life and what brought YANA to fruition. So welcome, Wayne.
Sure. And thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to talk to people and meet new people, such as Jaret. So thank you.
Wayne.
Happy to talk about my background a little bit, not to bore you with too many details. But I worked in finance and investment for nearly 25 years. I worked on Wall Street, institutional sales and trading with Merrill Lynch and Lehman Brothers in Chicago, and then joined a small little little $80 million hedge fund. And over the course of a decade, became a partner and helped grow the firm to just about $800 million in assets under management. And my role primarily, beyond being a partner of the firm, was in our investor relations and marketing, branding, and new business development. So essentially took the firm from, while it was around for 20 plus years, no one had heard of it. And again, very small. And we became internationally known for our skill set and focus in a very niche area within the marketplace. And during that time, I went through a variety of things. I've been incredibly fortunate in life. I've had the greatest career I could have ever dreamt of, wonderful education, two beautiful daughters, great friends, traveled the world, all these other incredible highs in life. And I also suffered my share of setbacks, right? I survived cancer, been diagnosed with depression, experienced divorce, estranged from parents, people die on you, right? That is nothing unusual. People go through this every single day. And and when I started going through the divorce, that was really one of the really low points in my life. And I asked myself the question, how the hell did I get to this point? And I reached out for the very first time in my life to a therapist, and I was never one to ask for help, always closely guarded. But it was probably the greatest thing that I ever did. And by reaching out to the therapist and having communication for the first time in my life, I finally admitted that I felt very alone. And we did a lot of work, identified the root causes, and then set out to correct all the causes of that. And it's still a work in progress, but much better today. And as I was going through that, I kind of came to the realization that I was done with working in finance and investments, and I went to my partners and I resigned from my partnership. And I didn't know what I was going to do, but I wanted to make sure that whatever I did, that there was great passion behind it again, and something that was very near and dear to me. But I took a couple of years off. I had two young daughters, and I focused on them. And fortunately, I was in a position where I could do that, and I didn't have to worry about working. And as I was going through that whole episode, a couple of things happened which kind of changed the trajectory of my life, and which led to the creation of YANA gifts, or You Are Not Alone gifts, which I can share a little bit about. But I started traveling the country to meet with clients, and not only clients but friends of every walk in life. And our clients were some of the most well-known entrepreneurs in the country, CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, family offices, and 5 of the country's most respected institutional or educational endowments, like Yale, Princeton, Stanford, MIT, and some others. So as I started traveling the country, obviously they wanted to understand why I was resigning from the hedge fund in my partnership. And for the very first time in my life, I was extremely open and honest with them. Right, I was practicing vulnerability, and I shared my story, and I also shared my story of how I felt very alone, and something highly unusual happened that I wasn't anticipating. Every single person that I talked to, regardless of status, income, job, titles, from school teachers to chairmen and CEOs, every single person immediately turned around and shared their story of either how they feel alone or how they felt alone. And it finally got to the point where I was like, this is crazy. That so many people, and people that you wouldn't even imagine, are feeling this huge depths of loneliness. And so I decided that I needed to do something about it. And I wasn't sure what it was going to be or how I was going to do it, but I decided that somehow I needed to correct that wrong. And with the overarching caveat that I never wanted anyone to feel the depths of loneliness that I felt. And I thought there was a pretty simple solution, and I'll get to that in a second. And another thing, almost a complete stranger one day came up to me and patted me on the back and said, "Hey, Wayne, hey, I'm sorry, man. I hear you're going through a divorce. Been down that road, really difficult. But I just want to let you know you're not alone. And if you ever want to talk, call me." And patted me on the back, and he walked away. And I was really awestruck by what a kind gesture that was from almost a complete stranger. And more importantly, this person said 4 words that more or less encapsulated my entire life: "You are not alone." And so I'm standing there and I'm saying those 4 words to myself, repeating them. And I'm like, then YANA. I'm like, YANA. I'm like, that's what I'm going to call my new mission. I'm going to call it YANA. And then it morphed to YANA Gifts, which I'll explain. And so what I ended up doing is I founded a for-profit and a not-for-profit company called YANA Gifts, or You Are Not Alone Gifts. And our stated mission is to eliminate loneliness, pure and simple. And how we go about doing that is, number one, through our branding. We're trying to inspire people just to simply reach out to others, let them know you care, and you share those 4 words: you are not alone. And we design and create stylish, attractive, repetitive use gifts that help deliver that message. Again, while sharing those 4 words: you are not alone. And it's important that the repetitive use, because we wanted that message delivered time and time again with every use. A lot of times you'll notice, and you've probably received it, people send cards and flowers if someone's going through something difficult. And they're lovely thoughts and kind gestures, but sadly, those kind thoughts and gestures get lost after a few days. The card gets put in a drawer, the flowers die, and then that's it. And I didn't want YANA Gifts to be forgotten. So, we created these really cool, really stylish, attractive, super soft, again, items that are repetitively used, so someone is continually reminded that others care about them and they're not alone. So, along with that, I also set up YANA Foundation, and just, again, not to bore you with the details, but simply how that works is we donate 2% of revenue to the foundation. We don't fundraise. We don't ask for donations. We wanted to self-fund the model. Every quarter, we randomly select a YANA customer, someone who's purchased YANA. And whoever's randomly selected, that individual gets to give away the foundation's dollars. And the only caveat that they have to adhere to, or a guideline that they have to adhere to, is that you have to help people in need, right? So they could, and it's not a lot of money because we're small. It's maybe a couple $100, but they can give it to their next door neighbor who's been out of work and can't pay some bills. They can give it to a struggling college student that needs some help buying books, or they could walk up to a homeless person on the corner and give it to them. It's up to that individual to make that decision. And I designed it that way because we're using our customers' dollars, right, in order to fund the foundation. So who better to receive the goodwill than the customers? So let them make the decision. So that's how that works. And then obviously, as we grow, we want to hire difficult to employ individuals. We have to practice what we preach. And so internally, that's how that's how and why we manage the company. So look, everyone needs a first, second, and third chance in life. And those are the type of people that we want to try and hire as we continue to grow. So I know that's a very quick and it's a very brief explanation. There's a lot more to it with YANA, but in a nutshell, I wanted to create a company that eliminates loneliness and rewards everyone for getting involved. If you buy a gift and give it to somebody, some of those dollars goes and helps somebody that you don't know. And when you help people that you know, and then you help people that you don't know, you're also helping yourself. So it's this really beautiful circle of helping others while making yourself good, which is really helping yourself. And just those little messages are one of the many ways that people can decrease and eliminate feelings of loneliness with others.
So Wayne, so I'm stepping back. You said a lot of really pertinent things. One of the items that I was brought to my attention even more was you were essentially, when you were traveling the country, talking to people in all different walks of life, CEOs, entertainers, teachers, right? You were living the YANA vision. You were providing them an outlet. And I guess, with loneliness and anxiety clearly being such a large epidemic, it's impacting most of the globe. When you were having these discussions with the different individuals and focusing in on different things and helping them and just being open, I guess I've got two kind of questions to ponder and think about. One is, what was some of the feedback indirectly you were getting that was causing a lot of the loneliness? I mean, the root cause analysis. What were some of the things you were hearing? Because that will help. That will help our listeners as well if they hear about some of these things directly. And ultimately, as well, coming full circle, sitting down, did you go back to a lot of them to get their guidance as you were, establishing YANA, so almost using them as a sounding board to build the business? I think they had a clear role there. It's really interesting.
Yeah, well, having all those discussions, that was the driver of the beginning of the business. And yes, as I came up with the concept, I certainly shared it with everyone. And the feedback was unanimous that it was a beautiful, amazing idea, and they thought it was wonderful, and they thought it would be successful. Yeah, but obviously, having an idea is one thing, implementation and execution is something completely different. But here, I'll give you a story. This is just one example, and I guess the thing that I could say is that, look, everyone feels lonely for a variety of different reasons. But it comes down to sometimes fear, sometimes isolation, not being vulnerable. But it's really feeling like you're the only one going through a particular episode or situation. And I just wanted to point out is oftentimes you find that when one person shares their story, no matter what it is, it typically automatically resonates with another person. Like, well, this person's sharing their story, so that gives me permission to share my story that I haven't told before, or empowers me to say something. It kind of gives them permission. So the thing that really sent me over the top after hearing all this, and I'll never forget the conversation, and I still get emotional about it, but I'm with the CEO of a huge company, and I shared my story about feeling lonely and how it impacted my life and what I was doing about it. And he turns to me and he's like, "Wayne, what do I do for a living?" And so I'm like, "Well, besides being the chairman and CEO," and he's like, "Yeah, but what do I really do for a living?" He's like, "I make sure that all my employees have the resources that they need in order to do their job as best as they can. And I'm a cheerleader. I'm patting them on the back. I'm telling them they're doing a great job." He's like, "But who tells me that I'm doing a good job?" And here's this guy starts crying in front of me, has everything in life. And to me, it was the most surreal moment. And he's like, "No one tells me I'm doing a good job." Here's this guy, and I couldn't believe it. And, and so
That's
like,
gut wrenching.
he's like, and he's like, my workers don't tell me. He's like, my peers don't tell me because we're competitors, even though we're friends. He's like, I can't say anything because I'm the leader. I'm supposed to look strong. Now we've learned better than that, or I think over the past handful of years. But he's trying to set an example. And here's this guy who felt completely isolated because no one was telling him he was doing a great job for his employees, and felt all that pressure. So that was the tipping point for me of I have to do something about this, because this guy should not be feeling this way. That woman should not be feeling that way. And it's an oversimplification, because sometimes when serious mental health problems come in, but the simple fix is sometimes you just have to tell people, "Hey, I understand what you're going through. I've been through that." Or, something, "I had no idea what you're going through, but I know it's hard for you, and I want to let you know you're not alone. I'm here for you, or we're here for you." That makes such a difference in people's lives. You have no idea. It made a difference in mine, and it's made a difference in so many people's other lives that I participated in or witnessed from afar. So that story, was the one that really got me the most, and was the tipping point of really coming up with the entire concept of You Are Not Alone gifts, or YANA gifts.
Yeah, thank you so much for this insight, Wayne. I think people need to really hear these stories, not just you and your clients and so forth, but just what we're facing as a whole in terms of a nation. It's very difficult to go from a normal way of life, working in an environment with, for many people, is hundreds of interactions throughout a daily basis with coworkers, to now being thrown into basically your house and confined there in terms of isolation. And people are now having to come to all kinds of decisions in terms of their life, what they're going to do, whether they're going to change careers, whether they're going to have time to think and sit alone for several weeks, or what could be months of thinking, is this really my purpose, or what I was meant to do? And for you, you had that kind of moment, that aha moment where everything sort of shifted for you when you got out of a lucrative position, you got out of finance, and you went into something that you felt, I guess, a real passion towards, and something that maybe was a void there for a little while, and you wanted to give back in a really meaningful way that spoke to your essence, your soul, right? So people are going to have to be faced with this a little bit more. And what would your advice be for them in terms of connecting with their thoughts more if they haven't done that in the past because they're just caught up in this rat race? But also, how do they eliminate, a feeling of isolation and loneliness? What practical steps can they sort of take over the next coming weeks and months?
Yeah, well, I think I think the very first thing that just about everyone has to do is they have to allow themselves to accept that the position that they're in right now, it's hard, right? And you can say it's hard, and you can admit that. This is an extraordinarily challenging time. As you mentioned, people are being forced to work remotely, and those are the lucky ones. Keep in mind that so many people now are losing income, losing hours, and losing their jobs, and that's going to continue, right? So if you get to work remotely and you still have your job, that's awesome. But there are daily challenges with that, and as you mentioned, it's the isolation, and it's trying to get down a routine. You're not used to, if you have a family, if you have children, you're not used to being around everyone every day and working in a new environment and coexisting while trying to get work done. All extraordinarily challenging. But you have to own that first and say, yeah, it's hard, and we'll work through it. But even without that, it's still an isolating event. And there's kind of two ways that you could look at it. I can kind of go down the road of, all right, well, what do I really think is causing, the loneliness, which is resulting from some of that isolation. But, also, as you said, what are some of the things that you could do? So let's take the easy one first. Is that, look, the first thing that everyone has to do with this while dealing with the physical distancing, social isolation is, we have to all maintain perspective, right, of what's going on. This is not a forever moment. There is an end to it. So we have to be able to just view this with a little bit of perspective and calmness, first of all, as hard as it is, and just accept that it's going to take a little bit longer than what most people are saying or their expectations. And number two is, which I think is really critical, for the remote workers, is you have to establish a schedule. Right, you have to plan your day out to be productive. Put times on everything. You have to build in time to get outside as well during this schedule. Stay informed, right? But don't get overwhelmed. We don't have to watch the news cycles 24 hours a day. If you can limit it to 30 minutes a day, or 30 minutes in the morning and 30 minutes late at night, that's plenty. Not much is changing during the day. So stay informed, but limit the exposure to the news cycle, because frankly, it's depressing. It's just, and you're not learning anything new by watching it all day long. And when you are looking at these informed sources, make sure that they're a trusted source, and it's not some of the conspiratorial or, as a lot of people like to say these days, fake news. There's trusted sources and not. So just make sure that you're having a trusted source. Also trust the experts. We're not all infectious disease experts, so trust the experts that have the education, the credentials, and the experience. We don't have to trust the talking heads. Don't let fear overwhelm you. Again, we'll get through it. It's going to take time. It's going to be difficult. Sadly, some people are going to die, but there are a lot of things that you can do to prevent that. And just focus on, we're going to get through it, but it's going to take an effort from everyone. Right. So I think those are a lot of simple steps that people can take to help their daily lives and stay a little more focused and stay a little more positive. Now, on the other side, me personally, I think the biggest thing that causes loneliness, and it was for me, and again, there are all different reasons, but it kind of leads to it. I think, there are two areas that greatly impact lives and cause loneliness. And one is vulnerability and the other is fear. Right. And for me, I wasn't practicing vulnerability, and I'm a big fan of Brene Brown. If everyone is familiar with her, but she defines vulnerability as accepting uncertainty, taking risk, and putting yourself out there, or emotional exposure. Right. So you have to be authentic. You have to be yourself. You have to share emotions. If you're feeling afraid, you have to share that, and you have to tell people. If you're feeling happy, if you're feeling sad, you have to put yourself out there. And when you don't, it can be extraordinarily isolating, and again, which creates those feelings of loneliness. Because if you're not being your true self and you're holding things in and not sharing, it kind of feels like you're keeping secrets, and that never leads to a great path in life. And it's the same. Yeah.
No, I was going to actually say to our audience too, it's what you just said. Brene Brown is fascinating. It's Brene Brown. And I encourage everybody to listen to her video on the power of vulnerability. I just wanted to plug that in there, Wayne, so we didn't forget it, because that's a powerful message on top of some of the words you're sharing with us now, that people can continue to listen to when they're feeling down and out and truthfully vulnerable during the times we're in. So no, please continue. I just wanted to put a plug in there for that video, because it's a great one.
She's amazing. Her books are insightful and incredible, and she's done an incredible amount of research. So yeah, I would encourage all to do the same. And as I said, fear also leads to the loneliness as well, and it kind of goes hand in hand with that vulnerability. You have to put yourself out there. Stop being afraid or fearful of what other people think, or trying to fit in, or whatever it is. But fear really causes a lot of that, and it's a tough hurdle to overcome. But the best way to overcome it is just to be yourself, to be your true self, and be authentic, and you'll find your tribe, right? Trying to fit in never really works too well, because you're changing yourself in some way or another to be accepted, as opposed to being who you really are, truly are. So for me, and again, and I know these two things from my life experiences, they have a huge impact on the feeling of loneliness. And if you could try and practice those two things, it goes a long ways to help overcoming that feeling of loneliness.
Appreciate that. And one thing too, Wayne, that's a little bit off topic, but it's the matter of, and I guess this will be an opportunity for a lot of folks too, when you look at innovation and technology platforms, you hear it all the time, especially in the city, is access just to, as you talked about at the beginning, to therapists, right? Today, it's so expensive. Most insurances, corporate insurances, don't cover there. So the copays are so high that people just shy away from it. And I think that, and I'm hopeful, especially to people that are part of our network and listeners, take heed of this, and will help to reform the system to find ways that people outside of their network, because let's face it, people are always going to shy away sometimes from talking to, which they shouldn't. And we're going to get that message out there from talking to loved ones and friends and family about some of these deep-rooted issues, which I think could take a lot of the weight off their shoulders. But if our system is able to reform, we're able to use entrepreneurship to open up a little bit more to the whole telemedicine thing, but giving more access to therapists, right? Just to have that dialogue. I think that will do wonders to kind of solve and remedy some of this situation. So I think that's one end, and I'm curious to see some of the things that come up there, and we'll be monitoring that closely. And I guess, just kind of one other item that's been it's a core tenet of some of our episodes. And, we actually have one subsequent episode. We're going to look at polarization around marketing and branding for organizations, given these divided times that we're in. But I guess, one of the things we want to ask and kind of maybe close out on, because it's going to generate a lot of buzz, is given the current political climate, and you talk about the news figureheads, right? Obviously, the politicians across the country are kind of coming together and they're having daily sessions. They're bringing on experts and talking to people. But given the divisive times we're at and many ideological differences, and you see isolation among families, even they tell you, they give you a roadmap here at Thanksgiving or whatever holiday you celebrate, avoid these certain things. What would your advice and guidance be to individuals that are essentially facing depression and loneliness because they can't truthfully talk about openly their feelings on these topics with loved ones? I mean, it'll go out, it'll morph into many different directions. I don't know, Jaret, if you have anything you want to add to this vulnerability, fear that people have around this, but I'd like to spend a few minutes and talk about this piece because it is important. We need to raise it.
Yeah, no, you're right. Ideological differences obviously cause isolation and loneliness. And the first thing I say when you're bringing up family members and you get this roadmap of don't talk about this or talk about that. You have to discuss things and you have to have open dialogue. Doesn't mean you have to agree with people, but you have to listen to each other and try to understand where the other person is coming from. Again, it doesn't mean that you have to agree with them, but human connection is critical. And just because you have some differences doesn't mean that there aren't other things that you agree on or shared interest or similarities, right? The perfect example is look at any recent disaster, hurricane relief or anything in any part of the U.S. or around the world. When people are helping each other, they're rushing to New Orleans to help evacuate people. And they're reaching out their hands and pulling people from water or rooftops and putting them in boats and sheltering them, strangers, feeding them food. No one's asking anyone else, are you conservative? Are you liberal? Are you a Democrat? Are you a Republican? Are you Christian? Are you heterosexual? No one asks those things. It's just people helping people. And it's common ground, right? It's just human connection. And that's what brings people together. So when you're having an ideological difference with someone, don't let that separate you. What you have to do is try and get closer, right? And move beyond that to so many other things. So some people may find it hard to do, but it's really not hard to do. It's kind of the same thing. You're at a concert and everyone's there and they're swaying and they're singing and they're closing their eyes and they're dancing and everyone is kind of one in that moment, right? That's human connection. And again, it doesn't matter where you come from, who you are, what your political views are, again, liberalism, conservative, it doesn't matter. It's human connection. And so you have to try and find closeness. Hold someone's hand, hold a stranger's hand. It's a really simple way to try and get through those ideological differences. And again, it's hard because people are being pounded with it daily in the press, and not just from the press, but from both sides of the political aisles and everywhere else, not just in politics. But there's a lot of common ground with people, and again, it's just really that human connection that will really help eliminate a lot of that.
Well, look, Wayne, I mean, I just want to say on behalf of our entire community, Wayne Grover, we want to first and foremost thank you for taking the time out of your day to kind of speak with our audience. It's clear from your messaging and the YANA symbol that this community represents friends coming together, open arms, letting people know that they're not alone. And I encourage everybody listening, it's YANAcares.com. Go to the website, hear a little bit more about Wayne's story. Check out the shop. I mean, there's a variety. I'm looking at the latest items on the shop. You name it, from pendants to different necklaces and T-shirts and throw pillows and blankets, and get engaged. And one of the things Wayne, that we're trying to do is we're encouraging listeners to leave comments, posts, and we'll make sure we answer their questions. We'll connect you with Wayne. If you have any ideas or thoughts about how to advance and share some of this great work that's being done, please do that. And I encourage you to let us know. And Wayne, the plan is definitely, this is not going to be the last time. We're going to have you on some subsequent shows. I've been an incredible guest. And anything else you want to, Wayne, I guess in closing, anything else in terms of how can people, outside of checking out the website, how can other people, sign on to maybe your mailing list or follow, you on social or get in touch with you? Any other recommendations before we shut down for the day?
Yeah, well, the simplest thing is to visit yanacares.com and you'll be able to find me there. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on LinkedIn. It's really simple. So I get contacted daily. And if you wouldn't mind, I wouldn't mind closing out on this one thing. There is nothing wrong with saying to another that you are feeling alone or you're experiencing loneliness. I understand it because I felt it for a long time, but people feel shame around being lonely. It's as if feeling lonely means there's something wrong with you or wrong with us. And that's simply not the case. If you're feeling alone, tell somebody. And at the same token, a lot of times some people just can't do that. And so as an individual, if you see someone that you think is struggling, reach out to that person and let them know you care. And it's all right to tell them you don't understand what they're going through, but you want to try and help them and that you're there for them. And share those 4 words, you were not alone. So I just wanted to close out with that. If you're feeling alone, please tell somebody and talk it through. And if you think someone is feeling lonely, reach out to them. Call them up, do a video call. Go knock on their window and stand outside the window and keep that 6-foot distance, but talk to them. Try and do as much face-to-face, whether it's digitally or electronically or within, that 6-foot range as much as possible. Texting works, but it's not as nice as be able to see someone's facial expressions and have a connection that way. So that's all I would say. Reach out to others and share those 4 words. You're not alone. That's
powerful words and the right ones to end on for such an episode. Again, Wayne Grover, thank you so much.
I really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you guys. And if I could ever do anything for you both, please let me know.
Likewise. Yeah. Vulnerability is strength. 100% spot on, Wayne. Thanks so much.
All right, guys. Thank you.
Yeah, and Jay, for people out there who are really nervous, the preliminary reports are kind of scary a little bit in terms of the numbers that are cropping out, in terms of unemployment, the millions that have filed already. But the good news is that they're actually under what they really projected. The first numbers that came out, I think it came in at 3 million when they were really projecting 4 million, right? So after the first couple of weeks. So we can feel optimistic about what these corporations are doing, that they have a little bit more of a moral compass than maybe in the past, going back to 2008 when massive layoffs occurred. If you were an executive who was making pretty good money, but you were nearing that retirement age, you pretty much got axed, right? So you were maybe holding out until you were 65 to retire. And if you were 58, you were 61 and you were getting, a few $100,000 a year and making a nice salary, like you said, it doesn't always have to do with performance. You could be the best performer at that position. You were pretty much in 2008 a goner at that point, right? So I think that we're seeing companies really care a little bit more about their employees, but then also, the stimulus package, there's good points, there's bad points, to it. But at least there was some emphasis on incentivizing the corporations and businesses that if they were to go retain their employees, they were going to get basically reimbursed, and the government would basically pay it for them during this crisis, right? So it's great to see incentives like that, so to speak, and it's not going towards necessarily enriching executives and CEOs and all that kind of stuff, which there's plenty of that in the stimulus plan if you look deep in the numbers. But there were a lot of things that were pro-worker, pro-small business that you just need to take advantage of now and have some optimism. Now, Jay, closing, points kind of thing. If somebody is faced with filing for unemployment, and they are a hard worker, it's sort of against their constitution, so to speak, to be out of work. They just they don't even know what to do with themselves, and they want to get a job fast, but some companies are not going to hire right away after what's going on. So there's going to be a reduced job market out there. But fortunately, there are some reports of some companies that are hiring right now. I don't know if you're able to take a look, but do you have any sort of quick tips that you could sort of give people in terms of how they can land a job fast, despite what's going on?
Yeah, look, I think one of the biggest things, it's always a tough topic, right? I mean, I think people who are fired definitely not, they're not going to get, most cases, access to unemployment. So it's really important to make sure that you're part of that group that's within the layoff segment. But to collect unemployment, you have to have usually lost your job through no fault of your own. Typically is kind of because you want to. I encourage this. You can't. It's not a time to be proud. I think you should, especially given your financial situation. If you are stuck with unemployment, it's okay to file for a little bit and have that safety net, right? Because people who are laid off are, they're likely to receive unemployment just because of the environment they're stuck in. And I think that you need to really kind of think through this. But one of the biggest pieces of advice I would give, or I've talked to folks in the situation, you've got to stay really, really focused, right? And what I mean by that is typically a lot of folks have a certain area of expertise. And they're known for that. And again, it depends on what age bracket. Jared, if it was back in 2008, 2009, 2010, a lot of our friends out of college got jobs, made commitments, moved to cities, and then a few months later, they didn't have jobs anymore. So what would they could only focus on their educational pursuits, right? What they majored in. So it was a lot harder, and you were kind of at the mercy of the market. I mean, I remember you take whatever job you can get and then try to, wait out make yourself better, wait out the current environment, and continue to find opportunities and just take them on regardless, right? But I think that you want to get up, do those things, be laser focused, get up to date with the latest technology that's out there, right? What are recruiters using? And they're getting more and more savvy. And obviously, again, as I said earlier, LinkedIn's one of the best platforms in the world. And this is where seeking unemployment benefits helps, because it gives you a little bit extra money to use for those platforms if you need it. And you haven't already been able to expand your network. And then the third piece, again, kind of comes back full circle to expanding that network that you're within. So look at your community, reach out to close family and friends, reach out to, typically universities that you might have gone to play a very big role in those communities. And they have people that are typically dedicated to help you, regardless if you went there for your master's or your undergrad. So you want to leverage everything at your disposal, Jared. I think that's the message. Be focused. If you have a very varied skill set, use the time to get a little bit more focused. Use the time to take advantage of free online courses to improve skills, right? And then kind of just drive it forward. And you know what it's going to help with, Jared, which is the second part of this, this episode here that we want to talk about around loneliness, right? You talk about loneliness, which is an epidemic affecting the entire globe. It's close to nearly half of Americans, I think, feel lonely at one point of time or another. But if you are unemployed, go out and network, right? Or get online and network and meet people and interact. And I think, Wayne Grover in a minute is going to go dive in a little bit more into this topic and give some of his valuable insights and keen examples from his career. But that would be my advice, Jared. I think, though, if you focus on those 3 or 4 key elements, work as a community, as a team, we're going to get out of this and rely on people that you may not have connected with in years, in many, many years, that you might have gone to school with or a part of that community you live in. I think you're going to be good.
Those are some fabulous points, for sure. I mean, it's cycles, right? So just view it as a cycle. We're going to get out of it. You might have to take a temporary job you don't necessarily love. There are businesses hiring. Amazon, I know, is hiring right now. CVS, Dollar General, Target. These stores that are basically getting flooded right now with everything that's going on. They need people. So you might need to take a temporary job. But I think you hit the nail on the head here, which is a couple of things, Jay. The networking piece, right? Which is just basically, don't wait until you're fired to start networking with people you haven't connected to in a long time. Start now. Plant those seeds now. That's golden advice, Jason, for sure. So, yeah, really appreciate that.